All right.
All right. All right. So today we're talking about some unfortunate events that have occurred in the world, and it brings up the topic of concealed carry and what you need to do to respond to those situations, being prepared for it. And, there's a lot of people out there, maybe they shouldn't carry a gun. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, naturally, if you're not going to practice and train with it and become comfortable with it, don't become a liability. That's just a no-brainer. But the biggest thing, I think, is if you are going to train, then, of course, do. It's sad, and of course, all the events that have recently occurred. The one thing I will say that nobody in the gun industry likes to see this happen. No. Not because it's bad for our industry, but just because it's bad for everyone. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. The one thing that's crazy to me is the narrative that's always spun because we refuse to lay down the guns and give up rights, that we want to see more of this happen, which is the exact opposite. And then, of course, that narrative that, oh, more guns is always the answer. Not necessarily, but more guns in the right hands is the answer because you stop threats. The threats aren't going to go away if everybody gives up guns.
Hey, at the end of the day, this is really a marketing issue. I hate to say this. You look at it, if you want these events to stop, they need to be stopped by people that the media prop up. So when somebody does stop one of these events, they need to get their time and their fame. And if I was somebody who did stop one of those events, I honestly would not want my personal life invaded that way. So it's a catch-22. But you have to see the real heroes recognized when something is stopped.
Even so, half of the people that commit these acts are doing it for the notoriety, for the fame, for the recognition. Otherwise, this didn't used to happen basically Columbine. I mean, it just didn't happen because they saw what the national media would do if you did something like this, something this horrific. You get the attention, whereas a lot of these people feel unseen.
Yeah.
Or unheard.
And attention is currency.
And attention is currency. They see influencers, they see this, and they see that. And it's crazy because the media could stop it like that, but the reality is they don't want it to stop because it sells.
Yeah. It's massive ad dollars for the media.
And they don't want it to really stop at all because if these events didn't happen, they couldn't have wall-to-wall coverage for a week. What would they be talking about this week if it wasn't for this? Well, probably Israel. But that's still conflict, war, death, destruction. That's what they sell.
This current event that happened with the guy still being at large just creates that narrative. I mean, this is ideal for the media. It's what they want because they, like you said, they have something to report on. They've extended this news cycle out a significant amount of time versus the guy who commits suicide at the end of the act or is killed by the cops or even captured and arrested. Then they've got their day or two of going and finding their family background, whatever history happened there, and then it's over. Now, till they capture them, they can run this out. Now, granted, they won't mention it as often as time goes on, but it's still going to be part of the news until they find out what happened to them.
Right, but see, that's the thing. Again, he's getting propped up, and that might not have been his motivation. Yeah. But, for instance, school shooters, which to me is just the most incomprehensible thing on the planet. But those people are 99% of the time just looking for the notoriety. I mean, that's 9 times out of 10 they surrender. 9 times out of 10 they survive. A lot of them are sitting in jail or prison right now.
And in a perverse way, they're probably looking for their day in court and like knowing that the cameras are going to be in the courtroom, and that makes them.
And obviously, some of them are absolute psychopaths. Well, they all are. But, they've lost their minds. They should have not had access to guns. We get that. But at the same time,
honestly,
a law's not going to stop it.
Here's my take on it. If we can trust you to be on the street, if we can trust you to be a part of society, you should not have your access to guns denied. I do not believe if you think somebody served their time, they committed a felony or whatever, if they're considered safe enough to be out on the street, they should be allowed to be a full citizen and get back all their rights. They've served their time. Now, I know that doesn't really work with the current system and how stuff's set up, but that's what we have to work towards.
Yeah, and the only way that's really going to happen, though, is obviously punishment is actually strictly enforced and given.
Yeah, and major reform on
Yeah,
every level, which isn't going to happen.
Yeah, so, but I don't disagree with you. But obviously, in the current system, that's. But
we both agree in principle.
Even in voting, I mean, they should get that
voting
back.
rights back.
Everything, like you said, full citizen. If they're reformed enough to walk on the street and they've served their time for their punishment that we've as a society deemed they have. So,
and again, self-fulfilling prophecy to a certain degree. When you tell somebody that they're lesser than and they do not get those rights back, why would you be incentivized to become a productive member of society at that point?
Yeah. Well, it's just constant, like felons looking for jobs. Now we're going down a different rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But, that's a whole different ball game. But, yeah, it's hard for them to get jobs because of their felon status. But they've served their time. They've done their community service, whatever, probation, serve that out. Why are you adding barriers to them to rejoin society if, in fact, they're able to be productive members of society? So
there's all kinds of cases, I will say, of guys that make mistakes. They go serve their time. They're productive members of society for number of years. Why can they not own a gun to protect their family? Yeah. Why can they not be a positive impact to society at that point as far as making society a safer place?
Yeah, even if they had a path back to that, I mean, that's in proving that you've changed.
Yeah.
Give them a little bit of time.
Like an extended type of probation or something.
Whatever. As soon as, boom, let them get all the rights back, including their Second Amendment ones. I don't see anywhere in the Constitution that says you can suspend people's rights because they've committed crimes, but they're free people now. Like they've served their time, they've done their punishment.
Yeah.
Now they're still second class for some reason.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so
we digress.
Right, back onto that. But so a couple weeks ago, there was the global call for jihad or whatever. So we saw the stuff online. Everybody was going crazy. I thought you shared with me that Travis Haley clip where he was like, when they tell you they're going to attack,
they're not.
Yeah.
They're going to hit you least expect it, which is why you always need to be prepared. And with this most recent case, if somebody would have been there, even with a pistol, I know this guy had a rifle, but if they'd had a pistol, they could have at least fought back. They could have pushed him out, because I don't think if this guy would have encountered firearm resistance where someone's shooting back at him, he's not going to retreat. Yeah. Because the fact that he didn't get in a shootout with the cops, he didn't kill himself, he doesn't appear to have any kind of like death wish. I saw some report, I don't know how true it is because you never know what to believe these days, but that he had some kind of psychotic episode and was hearing voices. So, you don't know what's going on, but at least if you'd have shot back, even if you'd have missed this particular case, it might have pushed him out of that particular business, and there would have been less casualties.
And if you look at these situations where these guys come in and attack, like people always kind of treat it like it's a drawdown in the Old West where you have a guy with a handgun versus a guy with a rifle. They're staring at each other. These are very fluid situations where he's attacking targets of opportunity.
And what if he doesn't see you? You hit him from the side. It doesn't matter what kind of weapon
you might be able to dome the guy with one shot to the head
and it's over.
End it and save a lot of people.
Yeah. And, no, not everybody needs to carry. I get that.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to, don't. But.
And if you do carry, you need to understand what your skill set is and what distances. I was at the range yesterday, and I was shooting revolvers, and it's like, what distance do I feel comfortable? What time frame can I pull the trigger? How quick can I make this shot and know where my hits are going to be? Like, I can do .75 splits at 15 yards and guarantee I'll be in the A zone.
But even then, being in some situations where
stress
have had guns drawn, it's not always how fast can you get it out. Sometimes you do have a little time to think about your method, get your gun in your hand safely, get it down range, and just address the threat.
So global call to jihad, all that got conversations going, and I can't tell you how many people I talked to that they're like, oh, now I've got my shorty AR with a folder and stuff in a bag. I've got 5 mags with me, all my med gear, everything, and I'm just carrying that bag with me everywhere I go. I'm like, that's not how things are going to go down. Or I'm keeping it in my truck.
Right.
You need to have a gun with you. Like, if you're prepared for a certain situation, you need to be prepared for it mentally and gear-wise at all times. So make the gear you have work and understand the limitations which that works in. If you are in a situation, most of us we're more likely to be attacked by a mugger, somebody we know, like all the statistics. This is just to be pie in the sky.
Yeah, that's just to be clear. Like the media and people with agendas try to make out that these mass shootings, which are again horrific, nobody wants them. They are not as common as people make them out to be. When it happens, we get wall-to-wall coverage, and then we talk about this for 6 months. It just is what it is. It's horrific. It's terrible, but it is not an everyday occurrence like a lot of people say. If you really break down the numbers, and they're calling mass shootings, what, three people or more?
Three more, and most of those are gang.
Yeah, a lot of those are inner city gangs, drive-by shootings. You can hit 3 people,
You can
and
actually
it's not
break
even
it down to like 25 zip codes or something.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, but and all those numbers get lumped into one. Now these big ones, these mass ones, these ones that are really horrific, like Las Vegas and this one, and a lot of the schools. Again, schools are
soft targets.
They're soft targets. They're incomprehensible to me. There's a lot of things that failed in those, but including the SROs, that was the worst part.
Why?
Is the law enforcement failures in those were insane.
And I'm going to say this: teachers should have the right to carry. Nobody should know they're carrying.
As long as they want to, again.
Yeah, they should have the right. They
Yeah.
should not be forced to.
Definitely not forced to, but and even if they had to train, because I mean, law enforcement has to train to be able to carry in sensitive areas. But I mean, even if the school certifies them to carry that, but I don't think there's a lot to unpack with the whole teacher carry thing.
Well, and there's a whole lot of this is what people don't realize about carrying concealed. People who don't do it, there is so much liability as somebody who carries a gun every day.
Oh yeah.
Like, if you go into a situation, you have the best of intentions. Let's just say there is that mass shooter. You're going and you're shooting at them. You hit them 4 out of 5 times. That one bullet hits somebody innocent. You're getting a manslaughter charge, rightfully so. You could also look at, we've taken classes, we've seen medical reports, everything. Ballistics do funny things. You could shoot a guy, get solid hits, but it could go through the skin, hit a bone, wrap around his body, exit out at a different angle. And then that same bullet could end up hitting somebody else, and it's probably going to lose a lot of velocity, a lot of its effect by that. But it could still kill somebody or harm them. It's not a cut and dry. You shoot, once it hits, the bullet goes exactly where you think it's going to.
Right, but
There's
naturally with like something that just occurred, you're going to have to naturally take that risk, inherently take that risk. I mean,
but you have to understand that's
but it's still a risk.
And I hate to say this.
It's not the Wild West. You can't just come out guns blazing and be like, oopsies. You got to.
Did you ever have to take the concealed carry class, or because the law enforcement?
So I took the concealed carry class when I was 18. Couldn't obviously get it till I was 21, but in North Carolina, they don't have, like, your certificate doesn't expire. Or at least it didn't at that time. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it didn't expire, so I just took my certificate when I was 21 and went ahead and got it. So I had my concealed before I ever entered law enforcement.
Gotcha. So you took the class. I mean, I took the class, and it was interesting. There were some people in that class, not many, but a few individuals that thought they were almost getting like a license to kill, like the James Bond 00 license. The second the instructor started going over that, all the rules and regulations and all the liability that you have on you, those people just like zoned out, like, I'm never touching a gun again.
Yeah. And a lot of people, and concealed carry is different for everybody. A lot of people consider concealed carry just having it in their vehicle.
That does no good.
It does no good in a situation like we saw the other day. And let's be honest, the most reasonable concealed carry, like, I know people have folding ARs, have the bag, and don't get me wrong, we sell products for that. So I'm not bashing that in any sense.
It's extremely niche within a niche.
It is. Like this was one of them was a bowling alley.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a folding AR and a backpack in a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not hating on you if you do, but I'm not.
Now, I'm sure if you had a product that was specifically designed to fit in bowling bags right now, it'd probably sell like crazy for a month.
Yeah, but that's
never sell another
wildly
unit.
niche. But yeah, I mean, most things are going to be handguns. So the most practical thing, no matter what anybody argues, it's going to be a handgun. Now, if you're going hiking, camping, you have long range, sure. Something with distance, with penetration, range, better terminal ballistics. Yeah, get a bag, get something that'll carry it.
You know, we had a conversation earlier talking about threats and like terrorist attacks, whatever, and truck guns. I think if you have a truck gun, it probably needs to be set up for 500 yards and out. And I explained my reasoning to you on that, and you're like, holy crap. I don't want to say too much about it because the threat, you know, somebody might take that idea, unfortunately, in this time.
Yeah, we're not going to.
But truck gun, perfect place for it, having the ability to engage somebody at 500 yards and out.
Yeah, I mean, again, truck gun is you have time. Any kind of vehicle specific gun or any kind of firearm or weapon that's left in a vehicle, there is time to retreat or to acquire that gun to then engage a threat. So the only thing that really makes sense for on-body concealed carry for immediate use is handguns.
Yeah.
Always has been.
And frankly, if I'm sitting in the parking lot and I've got somebody with me that is going into a store, a loved one that I care about, and something goes on in that store, I get a call from them or something, hey, this is going on. Even if I have a rifle in the back of my vehicle, I am not grabbing it out. I am going in there to get them with my handgun on me, as it always is. I don't have to grab anything. I probably would grab my medical. I've got medical stuff in the side of the truck. I'd probably grab that, shove it in my pockets or whatnot. And then I'm running in there. I am not drawing a gun. I am not doing anything to make myself a potential target.
Yeah.
You got shots going on in a mall, and you see a guy running around with a handgun.
Well,
the good guy's going to shoot you.
Yeah. Well, and two, with just a handgun.
Yeah.
When the cops do get there, because they'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually. Within 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. When they get there, you can then holster that handgun and...
Not when they get there. Not when they get there, but
well, obviously,
well
as they
before.
start getting there, if the threat's done, you need to not be a threat anymore and put your gun up so you're not misconstrued as the threat.
Until you can visibly see that threat and you're ready to engage, I would keep that gun concealed.
Yes.
And once you have neutralized that threat, that gun would go back into concealment mode.
Absolutely.
And once they
get
caught,
and if
keep your
the
hands
threat's
up,
still active when they get there, and
drop that bitch quick.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say if you're not actively engaging, then put that sucker down because I don't want you to get smoked thinking you're the bad guy because they don't have a lot of times. I will say, you know, I was in law enforcement for a while, stuff gets relayed that you later find out was wildly inaccurate. So if somebody's calling in an active shooter and they're talking about a plaid shirt, but it's a dude wearing a black shirt that's actually the bad guy, and you're the guy trying to stop the bad guy. You're both now an active shooter, and you're both going to get smoked.
Yeah, and how many people on dispatch are hearing how many people are
you're
calling
getting different calls. It's blowing up. You know, it's crazy down there. And
also, you might have the freaking guy who he's not going to engage the threat, but he's got his family or he's hunkered down by himself, whatever. He's got his LCP or his 38 or his Glock 19, whatever it is. He sees a guy with a gun walk by, bam.
Yeah.
And you can't blame him. You can't.
No.
Because he thinks you're the threat at that point.
Well, and that's where it would get sticky. What if you have like 4 or 5 concealed carriers trying to take down a threat? Well, hopefully, you know, if
I'll say this, it doesn't bother me having been to a lot of training classes, having shot with a lot of people of varying skill level, and having shot with a lot of law enforcement. Law enforcement scares me sometimes more than the concealed carriers with their skill level.
Yeah, I mean,
especially responding with handguns.
There's a wildly different range of people in law enforcement. So you have very few are true like gun enthusiasts. Most of them kind of fall in the middle, and then there are some on the wildly different spectrum that you don't want to be near them shooting.
The only time in a class I almost got shot, it was a law enforcement individual. It was a badged officer who was, I can't remember if she was deputy or PD or, sheriffs or police, but she was a patrol officer that almost shot a couple of students due to unsafe handling of a gun.
Yeah, which is just handling is a little different story, but actively running around with it can be, which, I mean, it all translates. Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, times it.
Yeah, and the law enforcement officers, they do, like, how many rounds a year do law enforcement officers shoot in training
if
under
they
department pay?
only qualify.
Yeah.
If they only qualify, at least in North Carolina, it's going to be 50.
50 rounds, guys. That is one box of ammo, $11.99 right now.
If they only qualify. Now, that's if they didn't do any other practice, on themselves, or the department didn't do any other practice. They just do the qualification.
There's a lot of departments that have limited budgets, and that's what they're doing. And how many officer, like my town I live in, there was an officer involved shooting. I live in the county, but the town. It's been 20 years since they'd shot somebody. So
it's and still, I mean, I know they say law enforcement shootings are like, you know, they do happen, but they're not as wildly, you know, they don't happen like every time you go out.
And you come from an area with 2 major interstates intersecting that are major drug routes.
Oh yeah.
So your county is more hot for that sort of thing than probably 99% of areas.
Yeah, especially when you get even more rural than what we are, which we're relatively rural. But yeah, we have 2 of the major interstates in North Carolina intersect, which pretty much tells you where I live, which is fine.
They can look up your shop, Selma.
Yeah, you can see we're in old good old Johnston County. But so I mean, that's the thing though. The biggest problem with the narrative of these active shooters is that good people can't stop them, and it's all relying on law enforcement. But it's always interesting to me that the same people that are screaming to disarm the populace don't trust the police about half of the time. So I'm like, well, what utopia are you trying to achieve here that's just not going to happen?
Yeah.
Like, you want the government to have all the guns, but you don't trust them to have all the guns.
You're convinced the government's going to turn into Hitler as well.
Yeah,
it's
and then like
weird.
As the political tides shift, you shift who, like, I don't understand. Like, I want both spectrums of political people to have guns, because I think the populace should not be disarmed, because then the government can't trample the populace. No matter what argument you use, it's all about making sure the government can't trample the populace.
You want the argument to stay consistent, not just based off what side's gaining ground.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me who's in power.
Yes.
I don't care.
What you want is the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take the rights of other people away. Like, I don't want to strip the rights of anybody who doesn't believe what I believe politically either. I think they should be able to have the same thing I do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
I mean, that's the whole point. So, and that way, hopefully, it stays, how it's supposed to.
But so when you look at the liability, though, of carrying a gun, we can try and transition to that more. So I took ECQC, Craig Douglas's class, Extreme Close Quarters Concepts. And most people think it's combat. I believe it's concepts. Because the class, though, we did this exercise, and it was the most valuable exercise I've ever gotten in training ever. Everybody in that class, there was one guy who didn't carry a gun every freaking day. There might have been 2, but he wasn't really a student. He was more of a observer. He was a professor from Wake Forest, and I think he does. I know he carries. I don't know if he carries daily, though.
Probably not on campus.
No, he teaches a really cool class for, I hope he does carry on campus, but in North Carolina, it's not a legal thing to do. But he teaches a class on gun culture in America, and he observed the entire class or the course I took. We had some guys in there who competition shooters. Other guys were like extremely good jiu-jitsu guys. One of the guy, Eli Knight, he was a freaking animal. There's another guy I follow on Instagram, but I'm forgetting his name. He did a bunch of stuff with the Panthers using jiu-jitsu and martial arts to help their training, make them more flexible. And then there was another guy, a little Filipino dude. He with a freaking blade. All the stereotypes about Filipinos and blades, they are true. It's very impressive. That guy was probably the most well-rounded as far as shooting and jiu-jitsu. But class, though, get to the point. We did this exercise where Craig would put a couple of us in a circle, and he'd have one guy, you're there, you have a blue gun on you, and you're supposed to react to whatever happens. Then you have one person who's actively engaging you. They might be engaging you with, hey, man, can you give me directions to this place? Or, hey, give me your freaking wallet. Like, whatever the situation is, you don't know what they're going to do. They might transition from, hey, they're going to get closer to you using this nice tactic, and then they're going to switch to trying to mug you. Or they might just get close and then walk off. So you've got to avoid pulling out your gun, brandishing, and treating them inappropriately in that setting. But you also have to be able to apply appropriate force if they do something that merits that appropriate force. And then sometimes you throw a third person in there who could help you, help them, just be a witness. You know, the situation was very fluid and you didn't know what was going to happen. But anyway, we were all standing in a circle around that. The event would go down, however it went down. You could not get the entire circle to agree on who was in the right, even though we're all standing there actively watching it. And it was like 2/3 of the circle would agree, 1/3 would not because the angle they saw it happen at.
Well, that's always going to be. I mean, look at cameras, and cameras are a catch-22 too.
Yeah.
I mean, they're great, and they show what actually happened, but from one vantage point generally.
Yes.
So, and you know, that's kind of the tricky part, and it's always tough, no matter what anybody says, to put yourself in that situation at that time, and what a reasonable person should do or would do. That's the hardest part. If you've never been in that situation, and you and I have had this conversation many times, and you're like, I'd do this, and I'm like, you don't know until you're there. That's what
I've been in situations where I've done, but you don't know what you do.
Like,
and people that have been in situations don't always know what they do.
No.
Yeah.
And the next situation, you're not going to know what you're going to do. That's where that training is so important. So hopefully you fall back on the training when you do execute something.
But here's the problem even with the training, and this is what Craig was getting to with the way he taught this. Like I said, by far the most valuable course I've ever taken for self-defense. You are going to be held legally liable for whatever happens. And you cannot guarantee on you doing the right thing, keeping you out of jail, keeping your family, financially stable. Because in most states, even if you don't get charged criminally, you can get charged civilly.
Which I'll segment, and this is like a little plug, but you should look up concealed carry insurance. We have insurance for vehicles, wrecks, whatever. Do look up concealed carry insurance. And I'm not even going to plug any particular brand at this point, but just look it up, figure out what is best for you, and carry. It's cheap. It's stupid cheap, because God forbid it ever happens. I hope you never have to use it. I hope it's a waste of money.
If you do have to use it.
But if you do get into something, because it even has bail money if you're charged for some of them.
Up to a certain amount.
Yeah,
so
up to a certain amount.
If you have a certain net worth, it doesn't apply as much.
Yeah, and two, if you, again, it has to be, you're always going to probably at first be presumed, self-defense shooting. But you obviously can't use it if you do something just egregious. But it is something to consider, because those legal fees are insane. Like, just like anything we consider, kind of like patents and everything else you always say, it's always about how much you're willing to spend to defend it.
Yeah.
You might get found guilty just because you couldn't afford to spend the money you need to get the right defense. So just something to consider. Hopefully it never gets used, but something to look into, especially if you're going to carry.
And most of these programs, they give you an attorney's number. Mm-hmm. Like, I've got it on speed dial in my phone. It's under my contacts with my parents, my grandma, you, and a couple other work associates, and a couple of buddies. And then I've got the insurance company's number that goes directly to their attorney's hotline, because that is my first call if something happens, and I have my card number, everything in that contact, so that that I'm calling the police if something happens. They are my second call. I'm hanging up and calling them.
So,
yeah.
That being said, in conclusion, what does everybody need to take away from all this?
I think the important thing to do is just, you need to have a gun on you at all times, because if you're that person who, hey, you carry every now and then, but you leave your gun in your truck, you're skilled with a firearm, and say this event happens to you, one of these events happen to you, how are you going to feel if you lose family members or something because you were too lazy? And really, carrying a gun is like carrying a phone. Once you get used to doing it, it's a very easy thing to just habit to acquire. It's not, you have to want to do it though. Mm-hmm. I was, hanging out with some buddies, and I was trying to help him get his holster set up. He did not want to wear his belt tight enough to make the holster work. So his holster was hanging like 5 inches away from the body, the gun hanging out. It was printing like crazy. I'm like, dude, you have to tighten up your belt so it actually holds your pants up. You can't just.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just, I can't stress enough that it's carrying isn't enough. Like you have to think about things, consider things, and train. Like I'm not saying go out there and do like train to shoot hostage rescue situations with the bad guy holding the good guy, but my point is shoot so you're confident that when you pull that gun out, you're going to hit what you're aiming at.
And also know, like, hey, I am good to a certain, if there are targets in the background, or not, if there's a target and then there's innocence in the background, this is a range which I feel comfortable engaging at. And what you feel comfortable engaging at the range under low stress on paper is going to be significantly more than what it should be in a real world scenario. Probably 1/2 at best, more likely 1/3 or less. So if you feel comfortable at 21 yards, 7 yards is probably your real life scenario in that situation. And also remember, people move in real life.
Yep.
Most of our training on ranges is
Static.
Static targets.
And I wouldn't just train and practice just standing.
No.
Lay down,
Shoot on the
be
move.
on your side, use one hand, shoot on the move, lay on your back. I mean, all situations that could really happen to you. I mean, just
angles. So if you have somebody standing up, you have people standing behind them, walking behind them. One way you can alleviate the chance of hitting somebody innocent is to get low so you can get an angle upward. So hopefully those rounds would go into a wall or somewhere else.
Now, they are going to travel, so just remember, that they're
And if you
you're
shoot,
responsible for them.
if there's a wall behind something, that doesn't mean those bullets aren't going through that wall.
Yeah, it depends on the wall structure and
Correct.
velocities and all that. So, but there's a lot to process, and there's been a lot of examples of where people that did carry stopped bad things from happening. And so I like to prop those up versus prop up the bad things that happened with no resistance. There's no doubt that the resistance is the stopping point, whether it's preferably somebody who's there who can stop it immediately, but then the resistance comes when law enforcement gets there and shuts it down.
So, and I'm going to throw this out of I forgot the guy's name. Remember the guy in Indiana made like a 40-yard shot, and
The mall.
Yeah, he shot like 10 rounds or something. I think he hit the guy like 8 times, and a lot of those he actually was closing in, is my understanding. But guy did good work.
Absolutely.
Something you need to take into account, the media jumped on him, though, because the mall he was at had a policy of no guns. But understand in most states, and look up your state's laws on this, that is not a law that carries force of weight. There's actually no state law.
Right. So
Understand your state's laws with that, though.
Yeah. And in worst case scenario, in no way would that guy ever be charged, even if he violated.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, I just
If he was in
couldn't
San
imagine.
Francisco, maybe.
Maybe. That's a different planet.
Yeah.
But there's no way a rational jury is ever going to find him guilty of anything for stopping something that horrific.
Yeah. But understand that there are in most states, look up your laws. This is not legal advice.
No. You're not an attorney. So
Yes, I'm not an attorney.
don't
I'm
listen
not
to this
getting-
guy. No, I'm just kidding. But
Look up the laws, though, and see what is the penalty if somebody has a no gun sign in your state. There are some states where it does carry force of law. Texas is actually one in certain.
Well, and two, a lot of times they're going to ask you to leave, obviously, like just leave, and naturally do if you are carrying and you walk past that sign. And of course, don't try to do it in government buildings. That's just foolish.
Yeah.
And airports. What is it with politicians trying to carry them into airports?
Oh, that one guy in China?
We're not going down that rabbit hole, but I don't know what it is about politicians and wanting to carry guns into airports and on planes. It's a whole above the law thing, I guess. But anyway, so wrapping it up.
Yeah.
So just train with your stuff, carry it.
Yeah. Know what your limitations are, and also understand if you have to take somebody's life, it is going to lead to so many more consequences for you that you can't even imagine.
Even if you know you did the absolute right thing, it's still going to it's still going to tax you mentally. And you're always going to have that guy that's like, oh, no, I wouldn't. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
Hopefully you never have to experience it. But
I've talked to some guys that are very stern individuals who have very high emotional intelligence. They know how to process things very well. They're very tough men. They have issues from that. It's
not a
unavoidable.
natural thing to want to do. It's just sometimes has to be
And
done because there's evil in the world.
Also realize there's going to be people that are going to idolize you for it if that goes down, and then there's going to be people that will never going to look at you the same in a negative way.
Yep.
So that's just something socially you're going to have to deal with for years.
Yep.
So,
well, it's a lot to unpack, and we could probably talk about it for 4 hours, but we're wrapping this one up.
all right. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. I don't know how long that was.